Welcome to day one of A Film a Day, and I couldn't think of a better film to start this series with than The Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. This is a film of my heart, and without doubt I would say a film that really set me on my course for the last 20 years. Today I could easily have broken my rule and started talking about Doctor Who Revolution of the Daleks to date stamp this a little bit, but I really wanted to go with something of my heart, and actually a film. And the works of Tolkien have laid deep, deep roots in me. I must have been about 9 years old. I'd gone through quite a hard year of hospital and medical issues, and I remember going to the cinema and seeing that film for the first time, and it just opened my mind to a whole other world, both in terms of filmmaking and in terms of fantasy, to the point where I have a bookshelf full of the works of Tolkien, including, of course, The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, The Lost Tales, The Children of Hurin, and a book that I have owned for 20 years, which is the Encyclopedia of Tolkien. Though it looks a little dog-eared, it is lived a good long life and has been used well, and is definitely probably my running into a burning building object, or running out of a burning building object. But yeah, I suppose the problem when you talk about Lord of the Rings, even if you're just talking about one of the films, is I could easily do a year's worth of videos just deconstructing every piece of that film. But it's been done 100 times, so I was just going to sort of focus on the things that really caught my attention on this session. Certain actors, I always like to focus on particular actors, and the ones who really drew my attention were Ian Holm, probably because of his passing this last year. Christopher Lee, because Christopher Lee, of course, always, walks into a room and immediately takes your attention, and Sean Bean. And they're the three actors who really took my focus this watch through. I saw little moments from each of them, particularly Sean Bean, who just gives this layered and nuanced performance that is so heartbreaking and tragic as it culminates in his death and, the corruption. It really is a tour de force performance. I remember being a kid and at the end of the film watching it and thinking, wait, that's the end of the film? But none of the story was complete. It's strange because I remember having seen Star Wars when I was younger, but this was the first film that I'd seen in the cinema and not fully understood that this was only the first part of a grand narrative. And it really struck me as I got to the end of this how strange that feeling was. Music is really important to me in film and television, and listening to some of the music throughout this just struck me. I think if you were to put a soundtrack of my life, I definitely think that several pieces from Fellowship of the Ring would definitely have to be embedded amongst those tracks, because they're just so evocative and powerful. I was talking about the Balrog scene and the fact that even, this one-off sequence villain is given his own piece of music that you immediately know, when you hear the music out of context, you go, yes, the Balrog music. And it is really what I would describe as a perfect film, or my closest equivalent of a perfect film. I'm sure as I go through this I'll come across films that I think, in terms of the narrative and the layering and the bringing together of everything, might do a better job. But what the Lord of the Rings, particularly in the Fellowship of the Ring, achieved was creating a layered and textured world that you really believe in and invest in, and brings in complicated, rich lore that you can either allow it to just float over you, or you just take it at face value and just keep going through the narrative. But I really understand how Lord of the Rings shepherded in fantasy as something that after, 2001, fantasy wasn't something that people kind of went, oh, well, it's just silly people dressing up, that became this platform for rich storytelling and, led to things like Game of Thrones. And honestly, it is a beautiful piece of work, and genuinely is probably my favourite film. I can already feel myself thinking, I'm going to say that about a few films as this goes on, but I'm going to sort of stake my flag in the ground and say Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring is my favourite film of all time. Anyway, like I said, I couldn't think of a better film to do my first video on. I will go into films that are much less fresh to me, so my takes will probably be a lot less nuanced, or a lot less rambling, probably. But yeah, thank you for joining me for my first video, and I look forward to our next film.